And welcome to our course on the birth of the modern mind, the intellectual history of the 17th and 18th centuries. I'm Alan Charles Kors, professor of history at the University of Pennsylvania, where I have been teaching for 30 wonderful years. Since we will be talking with each other for an extended period of time now, the accent is from Jersey City, New Jersey, with a touch of every other place I have ever lived. Our course, being a course on intellectual history, let me talk a bit about intellectual history as a discipline and as a way of thinking about the world. One of the hardest things to convince students of in general is that ideas and ways of thinking and ways of understanding the world have a history. When we think of great historical changes in human affairs, we tend to think of political history, social history, economic history, military history, and in contemporary times of gender relations and sexual history. But if you think about it, all of the higher species have relations of power. They have social organization. They organize their own means of production. They engage in struggles with each other. Their wars for the means of survival. And they certainly engage in relationships of gender and sexuality. We are not different from the other species in that regard. What makes our history remarkably different is that we are thinking beings of a different order. In addition to humor, perhaps one of the more singular human characteristics, we are distinguished from the other higher species above all else by our capacity for abstract thought. We mediate our relationship to nature by means of our thought and our understanding. And that is why we as human beings have more than a biological history, than an evolutionary history. We have what we think of as a living history, in which major changes occur not across geological and evolutionary time, but across decades, centuries, and millennia. If one looks at the life of termites, birds, raccoons, squirrels, cats and dogs, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years ago, they are essentially the same. Their political history, their social history, their economic history, their sexual relations. But if we look at human life, all of these aspects of our own lives have changed precisely because we think about the natural order. We think about the world in which we find ourselves, and we change our behaviors, our relationships to nature, our relationships to each other, our expectations, our senses of what is possible and impossible, what we may or may not do in this world, based upon that thinking. And that is what lends the uniquely human aspect to our history. Such that if we are to understand our economic, social, political, military, sexual history, we have to understand the changes in the history of human thought. For it is on the basis of the way that we think about the world that we organize our relationship to it. One of the hardest things to make people understand as an intellectual historian is that human thought has a history, that the way we think now, that the way we understand the world is not the way people always have understood it or thought about it. That some of the most revolutionary, I would say the most revolutionary changes in being human have occurred precisely because we have changed the way in which we think about the world. In particular, we change our thinking about the natural order, about what is out there to be known. And let's give you a fancy word for that: ontology, the theory or science of being, existence. What is out there? What is possibly out there to be known? What's the stuff of the world? What's it made of? What can and can't be in the world in which we find ourselves? You do not think the same way as your forebears do about ontology. We change our thinking about why things happen. That is to say, about causality. What makes things occur? What changes things? In brief, why do things happen? You do not think the same as your forebears about that essential issue. And we change our thinking about knowledge itself. What is it to know? When should I be persuaded? What's a good argument? What's an off-the-wall argument? At what point do I have to say, yes, he or she is right and I'm wrong? At what point do I say, that's advice that I should follow? That person knows what he or she is talking about. And the fancy term for a theory of knowledge is epistemology, the theory or science of knowledge. Most people rarely stop to think that they live in the midst of a history of abstract human thought, that they are the products of changes in that history of abstract human thought, that they are the inheritors of a philosophy, of an ontology, a theory of causality, and epistemology. Even people who do not think formally about aesthetics talk prose. They may not know that they're talking prose, which is a category may be distinguished from poetry, but they are nonetheless talking prose. You are thinking philosophically whether or not you are aware that you are thinking philosophically. For you have received from historical change theories of being, theories of causality, theories of epistemology, and debates and divisions on those subjects that in fact govern your lives, govern your behaviors, and account for so much of what is unique to the particular moment of history in which you find yourselves. The history of abstract thought, then, is not some airy, detached, ethereal subject, though there's nothing wrong with airy, detached, ethereal subjects. It is very much an essential part of understanding ourselves as historical phenomena. Changes in our thinking and understanding alter our very relationship to nature, including to social phenomena.